drywall in, the screws are in place, and now what we have to do is do all the plaster, or what we often call mudding. Now, some of you have heard of the quick set 20, the quick set 40, which means that the plaster comes in powder and it dries really fast. But I'm going to tell you, DIY 101, we're just going to use basic joint compound plaster, and honestly, I buy it in the pre-mixed bucket. I don't have to waste time, and I also plan ahead so that I don't have to use the quick mud or the hot mud, and I will let the plaster dry with time so that I can come back. It's also a little bit easier to sand, and if you use the wet sponge technique, which we're going to talk about in another blog, it's a lot easier and there's no dust. So what you need first is some trowels. And you can use a little 4-inch one, you can use a little 6-inch one, and you can even use a plastic one. All you're really looking to do is to get the plaster in place. You're going to want to do two things. First, you're going to want to cover all the holes, and Chris is going to take care of that. And then the next thing that we need is tape. And there are two types of tape. There is a paper tape, which is a little difficult to use because sometimes you have to back butter it first and then go ahead and put plaster over it, and it crinkles and it's a pain in the butt, honestly. And then there is the mesh tape, which has an adhesive backing on it, so it's sticky and it will just go right into place. So we'll go ahead and do that first. I'm going to show you. I'm just going to cut off a little piece of the meshing real quick because I'm going to show you another really fun trick on the other half. So it has an adhesive backing, and all you have to do is you can just go ahead and set it into place, and that's all set there. Now there's another way that you can go ahead and do that, and that is using, you want to hand me that right there, and that is spray mount, which you use for posters. You can go ahead and just put the adhesive on the wall, then put your paper on it. You don't have to back butter the paper. Your paper won't crinkle. It'll adhere to the wall, and you're moving on much quicker. We're moving much quicker, and with a lot less effort and, quite frankly, frustration. So here we go. We are going to mud and tape. Ready, Chris?
Mud and tape.
And go. So Chris is going to start by putting one light layer over each hole. When it comes to plaster, less is more. It's going to shrink when it dries and the water evaporates, but then you're going to want to come back and do 1 or 2 layers until you have a nice, flat, even surface covering all of the screws. And so I'm going to go ahead and seal the seam with first the adhesive mesh tape. Just cut it, put it into place wherever you want, and away you go. Option number 2, the spray mount adhesive. Spray on the adhesive liberally. You might want to let it set up for just a few minutes so it gets tacky, but then just cut the paper to the size that you need and adhere it nice and gently. It'll set into place, and now we're ready for the plaster. I like to start with a 4-inch trowel or a smaller trowel just to get it up there. I don't really care if it's pretty, I don't care if it's perfect, I'm not looking to feather it out just yet. What I'm looking to do is cover all of the tape with plaster from end to end, from top to bottom. Then I like to switch over to another trowel, a 6-inch trowel, because that's going to cover the whole space of the seam, and I can pull back in one stroke and get a nice even feathering and make it look pretty. Don't worry about it looking perfect yet, because we're always going to come back and do maybe another layer, which would be the second one, and maybe even a 3rd layer. What we're trying to do is light layers and then build it up nice and evenly. And so what you want to do is apply 2 layers of plaster, letting it dry in between. So we're going to let this all dry, come back, put another layer on, let that dry, and then in the next segment I'm going to show you guys how we're going to sand it all back, prime it, and then we finally get to start painting. Onward.